Who's the most hated woman in the galaxy?
I am Lwaxana Troi, daughter of the fifth house, holder of the sacred chalice of reeks, heir to the holy rings of Beta Zed. Who are you?
This is Lwaxana Troi. When she first appeared on Star Trek, fans called her unwatchable, despicable, the worst character on the show, called for her to be killed off.
Being punished for something, are we?
But they don't know what they're talking about.
Your minds are so unsophisticated, I can read your thoughts in my sleep.
Not only is Lwaxana Troi one of the best characters on the show, she's especially meaningful to some fans in a way that others simply can't see. So what is it that makes Lwaxana so special? And why do so many viewers miss what's right in front of them?
Your brain isn't sophisticated enough.
My history with Star Trek and Lwaxana Troi goes back to elementary school, when I tried to finish my classwork as fast as possible so I could go back to writing my Star Trek fanfic. I was obsessed with Star Trek The Next Generation. I loved the ships, I loved the aliens, I loved these costumes, but there were two things about the show that made me look away. One was the Borg, basically robot zombies. The other thing I couldn't watch on Next Generation? Kissing.
Humans like to touch each other. They start with the hands and go from there.
He's biting that female.
I was fine with the violence. But whenever there was a romantic scene, I had to turn my head away like it was a gory murder.
You are the most beautiful woman in the galaxy.
It was a running joke in my family. Uh-oh, here comes the kissing. Don't look.
Of course, we haven't time for that sort of thing.
What sort of thing?
Oh, God, would I love to show you.
I think the assumption was that it was normal little kid discomfort about adult relationships, but looking back, I think I might also have been a little tense because I knew it was something I was supposed to grow into, but I didn't want to, and I had a feeling I never would. Today, I can stomach romance on Next Generation, but I still don't love it. Sex on the show is so serious instead of fun. The characters try to seem seductive and confident, but their idea of what's sexy is often oddly formal.
I am programmed in multiple techniques. A broad variety of pleasuring.
It's stiff, dignified, not playful. It seems like a chore.
Oh, is there a special technique to this foot washing?
You generally start at the top and work your way down.
And even when the sex gets truly weird, it's still very chaste, metaphysical instead of carnal. And of course, it's all so literally straight. But there was one character whose romance I didn't mind. In fact, I looked forward to it. And that's Lwaxana Troi, an eccentric grande dame who appeared roughly once per season on Next Generation and the spin-off Deep Space Nine in a whirlwind of sparkles, jewels, and wigs.
Well, my brooch has been stolen.
You're certain you were wearing it today?
Yes, of course I'm certain. I never use this hair without it.
She was divisive on the show and in real life. But to me, Lwaxana was a revelation. And she sometimes made the rest of the show seem downright cowardly. And to understand why, we have to take a quick look back at where Star Trek began. It's the 1960s, and Star Trek's creator, Gene Roddenberry, is a frustrated TV writer. He wants to write about racism, the sexual revolution, Vietnam. The country is in the midst of one of its biggest, fastest cultural shifts in history. But producers kept telling him he wasn't allowed to include black characters in his scripts, or talk about current events. So he created Star Trek to use aliens as a metaphor. Make it look like it's a pulpy action show about little green men, but really, it's about humanity. And at first, nobody wanted that. The most popular science fiction at the time was Lost in Space, a nuclear family with a suburban vibe. A mom, a dad, kids. Instead of a dog, they've got a robot. Instead of a nosy neighbor, a dandy doctor.
Come into my arms.
I'd rather die.
But then, Gene brought his pitch for Star Trek to somebody who already had a lot on her plate. In the 1960s, Lucille Ball ran her own studio, Desilu, and Gene's frustrations would probably have been familiar to her. Over a decade earlier, executives had told her nobody would watch I Love Lucy because, as she later recalled, the public wouldn't believe I was married to Desi. He talked with a Cuban accent, and after all, what typical American girl is married to a Latin? Lucy heard Gene's pitch, a vision of the future where humanity has moved past its infancy into its adolescence. We've grown beyond our petty divisions. We accept each other's differences. We celebrate them. And now we've got a thirst for knowledge and growth. So we're traveling out into the unknown for adventure, exploration, self-discovery. And Lucy didn't get it. She wasn't a sci-fi person. She initially thought the name Star Trek meant it was about celebrities on a road trip. But she trusted the people around her who said there was something to this, and she put her support behind it. The original series ran for 3 years and tackled lots of contemporary issues that were previously taboo, especially sex.
When it is time to increase the herd, my provider will select one for me.
On Earth, we select our own mate.
Star Trek was made just as the old censorship codes on TV and film were crumbling, and it sometimes feels like a celebration of what would now be possible. Weird, sexy costumes, imaginative romance, a captain who's irresistible to all species.
I make my choice. This one.
And it wasn't just pure titillation. Star Trek was one of the first shows on US television to show an interracial kiss. And even back in the 1960s, Gene wanted to include gay characters on the show, and you can check out my video about George Takei for more about that. But he also knew TV wasn't ready for that yet. But by the time they were ready to create a new Star Trek series in the 80s, maybe TV was ready. Next Generation ran from 1987 to 1994. And I remember during that time seeing other shows on television tackle same-sex couples, kisses, even weddings. Those shows fascinated me, even if I didn't know or didn't want to admit why. A lot of Star Trek fans waited eagerly for Next Generation to be as bold as the original series had been. But over the course of 7 seasons, the show never had anything overtly gay, and only 2 episodes that were obliquely queer. One is about a crew member who falls in love with an alien man, but when the alien's gender presentation switches to female, the crew member breaks it off.
Perhaps it is a human failing, but we are not accustomed to these kinds of changes.
And that would be fine if she said she's just not into women. But in her breakup, she says her entire culture is unready for same-sex relationships.
Perhaps someday our ability to love won't be so limited.
The other queerish episode is about aliens who have rigid rules about gender, and after one of them says that they want to challenge those rules, they wind up getting brainwashed so they can fit back in with society.
It was all a mistake, and I should have realized it from the beginning. I had these terrible urges, and that is why I reached out to you, but it was wrong. And I see that now.
It's like a throwback to the days when production codes required queer characters to be punished or cured. I still love Next Generation, but given Star Trek's progressive and horny origins, it's embarrassing that the show lacked the bravery of more forward-thinking programs, like Married with Children.
I think you're gorgeous.
And that's not for Gene's lack of trying. He told fans he wanted to have gay content on Next Generation. He worked with a writer on an episode that was going to have a gay couple and a mysterious disease that was a metaphor for AIDS. And on another episode, Gene ordered writers to have background action that included gay orgies. And we don't have the time here to go into all the different queer storylines that Gene had planned for Next Generation, and frankly, some of them may be too graphic to even talk about on YouTube. But I'm posting more videos over on Patreon with lots more details that I dug up in my research. You can watch all those at patreon.com/mattbaum. So with Gene laying those plans, what happened? Well, producers knew that some markets wouldn't air episodes with overtly gay content. In fact, some had even refused to air the episode that was metaphorically about queerness. And fewer airings meant less ad revenue. And around that time, Gene's health was failing, he had to step away from the show, and when it came to the gay stuff, he was overruled. So instead of gay orgies, instead we get a scene about how annoying sex is.
I don't wish to appear rude, but I am not seeking Jamaharon.
All right. But you really should try it sometime.
But even though Gene had to step back, someone remained who could still exert a very welcome influence on the show. Majel Barrett. Majel had been with Star Trek since the beginning. Before the beginning, in fact. While Gene was a struggling writer, Majel was a struggling actress. She played bit parts, a housewife, a secretary.
How do you do? Well, how do you do? I'm Miss Massey.
A shampoo demonstrator, uncredited.
Do you want to say goodbye to dull, drab hair?
Majel had been mentored in comedy by Lucille Ball. She even got to work with her in some scenes, but the right role just hadn't come along for her yet.
Well, a good script might help.
Gene met Majel on another show called The Lieutenant, and the two fell in love. It was very romantic, but also complicated, since Gene was already married. And he was also seeing another actress from The Lieutenant, Nichelle Nichols. At one point, he floated an idea past the women.
I believe it's menage a trois.
But it wasn't to be. Nichelle said she didn't want to be the other woman to the other woman. But Gene wasn't too offended. He hired her to be the communications officer on Star Trek, and he hired Majel to be the ship's second-in-command. a commanding officer known just as Number 1. In the pilot, she leads the crew on a rescue mission. And when NBC executives saw that, the idea of a woman in command was so shocking that they refused to air it. Gene had to make a second pilot with a different story, and he wound up recasting Majel from second in command of the ship to a sexy nurse. Basically, a secretary, and he also cast her in a second role as the voice of the ship's computer, essentially a servant for the men on board.
Computer on. Record.
Recording.
20 years later, when it was time for Next Generation, Majel returned in the voice role.
20 minutes to auto-destruct.
But she also appeared in a much more flamboyant part.
Who else would they send to greet me but the captain? Oh, you may carry my luggage.
Lwaxana Troi, mother of the ship's counselor, Deanna Troi. Lwaxana only appears in a few episodes, roughly once per season, and each time she throws the entire ship into erotic chaos. In her first appearance, she's there for her daughter's arranged marriage, but when the groom says he's not feeling it, she encourages him to follow his heart, and he runs off with some aliens that he likes better.
Hello, Wyatt. We always thought you were a dream.
And by the way, if the actor playing that alien looks familiar...
Whatever the problem is, overlook it. My mother did with my marriage. And if you say something smart, I'll slap you silly.
In her second appearance, she's going through a sort of hypersexual menopause.
Hello, Jean-Luc. So glad you could come.
In a third, she rescues some hostages by seducing their captor.
My, what big ears you have.
Has anyone ever told you how attractive they are?
And then making Captain Picard seduce her.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
You didn't tell me that you and Captain Picard were...
You said you didn't want to hear about my other romances.
In one appearance after another, Lwaxana shows up in a festive mood, libido through the roof, the center of attention, having the time of her life, even if it's shocking.
Betazoid women are full of surprises.
Especially if it's shocking.
This is infamous! Infamous!
Among her defining traits is radical honesty.
Humans constantly think one thing and say another.
Yes, they do, don't they, poor dears? Our style of complete honesty frightens them.
And radical acceptance. When she appears on the spin-off series Deep Space Nine to flirt with Odo, a shapeshifter.
Every 16 hours, I turn into a liquid.
I can swim.
These are some of the only times that the show's attitude towards sexuality is truly fun, adventurous, boundary-pushing. It's like she's there to remind them of how brazen and novel sexuality was on the original series. And I think it's really impressive. A huge leap forward from sexy nurse and disembodied voice. Now she has power in her role, running circles around the crew of the flagship of the fleet. And I love that as a Star Trek VIP, Majel Barrett could have had her choice of any type of character, and the one that she gravitated toward was gleefully horny and naked. So why is this character so uniquely liberated? Well, it's no accident, and it goes back to Lwaxana's unlikely origins. Lwaxana Troi hails from the son of the Velvet Fog, Mel Torme, who you may remember from Night Court.
Oh my God! You Mel Torme!
His son Tracy was a writer on The Next Generation, and he knew that Majel wanted a more prominent role than just disembodied voice. So they crafted a part that was heavily influenced, according to Majel herself, by Auntie Mame, a novel published about 10 years before the original series aired.
But darling, I'm your Auntie Mame!
Auntie Mame was written by Patrick Dennis, who created a character who is riotous, unconventional, has a zest for doing what she pleases with no regard to social limits, and who teaches her nephew, also named Patrick, to enjoy life as much as she does.
Yes, life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death. Now, come on, Agnes, live!
The book became a play, a musical, 2 different films, and in every appearance, Mame is a camp icon, a flamboyant, drag queenish diva. She was played by icons like Rosalind Russell.
Oh, she's not English, darling. She's from Pittsburgh.
She sounded English.
Well, when you're from Pittsburgh, you have to do something.
Angela Lansbury, and the lady who got Star Trek on TV, Lucille Ball.
You should keep your hair natural like mine.
If I kept my hair natural like yours, I'd be bald.
Making Lwaxana the Auntie Mame of space was a stroke of genius. Majel had been trained in comedy by Lucille Ball. There are a lot of Lwaxana moments that remind me of Lucy delivering a joke. Mame and Lwaxana loudly resist all limitations, gendered or otherwise, so that no one can get in their way. Patrick Dennis, the author, took a more subtle approach in his own personal life. He married a person that he was expected to, a woman, had kids, but by the family's own admission, they really didn't know the real him. He led a clandestine double life, enjoying same-sex relationships while keeping them secret, as he would have to at the time for his own safety. Even the name on the books hid his true identity. His real name was Edward Tanner, but he chose the pen name Patrick for the books, same name as the character who Mame takes under her wing. I look at Mame as a sort of queer wish fulfillment. It's a reflection of a life that the author and so many other gay men couldn't have when it was written. Being told to repress who you are, but defiantly saying yes to what's in your heart, and having someone powerful who will say yes alongside you. Mame doesn't just live a carefree life for herself, she invites those around her to live as freely as she does. Whether they take her invitation is up to them, but the offer of the invitation is what matters. What an incredibly tempting fantasy for lots of people, and especially anyone queer. Of course, all the Mame books had a huge gay fandom, as did the stage musical and the films. And happily, Edward, the author, was eventually able to live the life that he wanted. In the 1970s, he started over. He came out of the closet, became a prominent figure in New York's gay scene. He also shifted from writing to working as a butler for the family that owned McDonald's. They had no idea about his success as a writer. And just as Mame encourages Patrick to liberate himself, Lwaxana extends similar invitations. When she meets a scientist whose customs forbid him from pursuing a relationship with her, she tells him, to hell with customs.
The Prime Directive forbids us to interfere with the social order of any planet.
Well, it's your Prime Directive, not mine.
She urges people to cut loose.
Now, life's true gift is the capacity to enjoy enjoyment.
And the relationship that meant the most to me as a young nerd is the one closest to Auntie Mame. It's an episode where she meets a young boy in desperate need of a figure like her. This is Alexander. He's a Klingon, caught between two worlds, raised with human and Klingon traditions. Not sure where he fits, but sure that everyone's expectations for him are wrong.
If you do not participate in the rite before the age of 13 years, you will never be able to become a true Klingon warrior.
I don't want to be a warrior.
I remember when that episode aired. I remember thinking how right Alexander was, and how sad his loneliness made me feel because I recognized it. Lwaxana shows up in the nick of time to help Alexander out.
Have I arrived too late? Or, can you still smile?
She shows him that if you don't fit in, that's okay. The galaxy's big enough that you can find a place where you do.
Variety, my little Alex. The great secret is not the variety of life. It's the variety of us.
I can't tell you how much I needed to hear that. At 12 years old, I might not have been open to hearing it from Lucille Ball, but I was definitely open to hearing it from a magic psychic space alien. And it was such a relief to see what that kind of acceptance could mean.
Before I met her, I was ashamed of what I was. Afraid that if people saw how truly different I was, they would recoil from me. Lwaxana saw how different I was, and she didn't recoil. For the first time in my life, someone wanted me as I was. The day I met her is the day I stopped being alone.
To young me, Lwaxana was such an unbelievable relief. I even wrote an episode about her in 6th grade, where an omnipotent alien falls in love with her and gives her command of the Enterprise as a gift. I think what I really wanted was an entire spin-off series about Lwaxana, a concept I still stand behind. So imagine my shock when I was listening to a Star Trek podcast a few years ago, and the host described her episodes as annoying filler. I was stunned. I thought, surely these guys just have the world's worst taste. But then I looked back at how critics described Lwaxana in the 80s and 90s. Some loved her, but others called her an overbearing shrew, inexplicable, boring, like a dentist's drill. Okay, I thought maybe fans would be more understanding, so I looked at old Usenet posts from the 90s. They called her unwatchable, the worst, annoying, stupid, ick, blech, wretch, barf.
I wonder what's made me lose my appetite.
So, what's going on here? Some complaints were that the character is too one-note. Nearly every episode has her prowling relentlessly after a reluctant man like Pepe Le Pew in space. And fair enough, that is true of the first few episodes.
I can't believe you, Mother. You sound like you're sizing up a commodity.
But that's exactly what men are, darling.
Others said that her episodes lacked ideas and substance. One Star Trek aficionado called out her second episode, mostly a collection of flirty vignettes, as a bunch of fluff, nonsense that didn't mean much. And that aficionado was Majel herself. I can't argue with that. And I have a feeling that there's another reason some fans might have bristled at her. As someone who stands up for what she wants, Lwaxana was usually pretty dismissive and disruptive towards the main crew.
You were just thinking of me, weren't you?
As a matter of fact,
well, think no further, dear heart. She's here.
Yes, indeed.
These characters are supposed to be our heroes, the ones that we identify with. And if we see them annoyed at a character, I can see how a fan might pick up on that and feel the same way. And that is a fine way to feel, if you do identify with the crew. But what about the fans who never quite saw themselves on the bridge, who got a vision of the future that excluded them, and when they were hinted at, the episode resolved by saying that even 400 years in the future, society still won't be ready for you? In that case, somebody showing up to cause a little mayhem would be welcome, especially if she tells you, the problem isn't with you, it's with them. Lwaxana's episodes tell us that it's nobler to follow your heart than to live up to others' expectations. That if you see an unjust rule, you're justified in breaking it. And that even if you don't fit in, she accepts you. And she wants to help you find the place where you do fit in.
I'll bet you've never been to a colony of free spirits.
These are messages that many people are fortunate enough to never need to hear. But they go all the way back to the foundation that Jean built and that Majel kept alive. That humanity's future doesn't just belong to some of us, but to all of us. And that's why I'll always defend Lwaxana as a character. She would look out for people like us, so the least we can do is look out for her. Now, in making this video, I found lots more great stories to share, like the gay orgies and dildo fruit that Gene Roddenberry called for in Next Generation, plus the mysterious tale of William Shatner's stolen wigs, and how Majel and Nichelle Nichols' characters had way more interesting stories on Star Trek's animated series.
I will tell you everything.
I'm posting all those stories and more over on Patreon. Patrons can also get exclusive Discord access, stickers and books in the mail, and lots more. You can join us over at patreon.com/mattbaum. And if you want more queer TV history, check out my book, Hi Honey, I'm Homo. It's about the history of queer characters on American sitcoms, from Bewitched to The Golden Girls to Will and Grace and beyond. You can even order a signed, personalized copy at gaysitcoms.com. Huge thanks to Trevor from the channel Media Processing for helping with the edit on this video. You can click the card on the screen to check out their channel, and there's a link in the description. And huge thanks to everybody who makes these videos possible with your support on Patreon. Now, if you'll excuse me, my cake has arrived.
Please, don't hurt me, Data.